My grandpa looked at me, shocked, and said, "Why did you take an Uber? Where's the SUV we gave you?" I froze. I couldn't believe what he was asking. That question made me realize just how deep the betrayal ran. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. I'm Leora Hayes. I'm 27 years old, independent, and I've always worked hard for everything I have. I grew up close to my grandparents, especially Grandpa Eben. He has always been kind, supportive, and protective of me. When he gave me my first car, I felt so lucky, and over the years, he trusted me completely. But my family isn't perfect. My Uncle Darren has always been jealous. He hides it well, smiling and acting supportive, but I've always felt it in small ways. He likes to make subtle remarks about my choices, my work, or my decisions. I never thought it would turn into something bigger, though. That SUV Grandpa gave me was more than a car. It was a symbol of trust and love. I took care of it, drove it carefully, and never thought anyone in my family could betray me over it. I assumed everyone who loved me would respect what was mine. I was wrong. The moment Grandpa asked me about the SUV, I knew something had happened. The shock in his eyes reflected my own confusion and fear. That day started a chain of events I could never have imagined. A betrayal that would shake my family and test everything I thought I knew about trust and loyalty. When I think back, my childhood was mostly filled with warmth from my grandparents. Grandpa Eben had this gentle way of making me feel like I could do anything. He would spend hours telling me stories, teaching me little lessons about life, and encouraging me to follow my own path. Grandma May was just as loving, always making sure I felt safe and cared for. Their home was my sanctuary, the place where I learned what family really meant. But not everyone shared that same kindness. My Uncle Darren always had a different energy around me. I can't put my finger on it exactly, but there was something in his eyes when I achieved something, like a quiet annoyance he tried hard to hide. At family dinners, he would compliment me in front of everyone, but there was always a slight edge to his words, something that felt like criticism in disguise. I noticed it especially when Grandpa praised me for small accomplishments. Darren would nod and smile, but then he'd make comments that hinted I didn't deserve it or that he could have done better. Over time, I realized he had this way of shifting attention away from me, turning conversations so that he remained in the spotlight. It was subtle, almost invisible to others, but I felt it clearly. Even though he tried to act supportive, I could see the way he compared himself to me, how he measured my success against his own. It wasn't open hostility, just this quiet, simmering jealousy. Looking back now, those early moments were the first signs that not everyone in my family wished the best for me. It planted a seed of caution I didn't fully understand at the time, but it would grow into something I'd have to face much later. On my 26th birthday, Grandpa Eben surprised me with something I never expected. He called me into the driveway, eyes twinkling, and handed me the keys to a brand new SUV. I couldn't believe it. The car gleamed in the sunlight, and for a moment, I felt like the luckiest person alive. It wasn't just a gift, it was a message. He trusted me, believed in me, and wanted me to have something that made my life a little easier. I hugged him tightly, overwhelmed with gratitude. Grandma May's smile warmed me even more, and for a brief moment, everything felt perfect. The SUV became a symbol of our bond, a reminder of their unwavering support. I imagined road trips, errands, and quiet drives where I could reflect on life while feeling safe behind the wheel. Darren, of course, was there that day too. He clapped and smiled, seemingly happy for me, but there was something forced in his tone. Later, he made small remarks, almost jokingly, about my driving choices or how I should have gone with a different model. At first, I laughed it off, thinking he was just teasing. I wanted to believe he was genuinely proud of me, so I ignored the subtle digs. I didn't notice it then, but a shadow was forming behind his congratulations. While I basked in the joy of the moment, Darren's jealousy quietly lingered, hidden behind polite words and hollow smiles. I felt loved, celebrated, and secure in my grandparents' care, completely unaware that the happiness I was enjoying was stirring something dangerous in my uncle. That SUV, which meant so much to me, would soon become a centerpiece in a betrayal I never saw coming. A few weeks after my birthday, Darren started asking to use the SUV more often. At first, he said it was urgent errands or helping with family tasks. I didn't think much of it. I trusted him and wanted to be helpful. It felt normal to share with family, so I handed over the keys without hesitation. But soon, I began noticing small things. A scratch on the door that hadn't been there before. A dent near the bumper. Even the tires looked slightly scuffed in places. I couldn't believe it. I checked my memory of every drive I had taken, and none of these damages made sense. They weren't accidents I had caused. Each time he returned the SUV, Darren smiled as if nothing happened. He would shrug off my concerns, saying, "Oh, it's just a little scratch. No big deal." I wanted to believe him. I told myself maybe it happened during parking or some other harmless situation. I wanted to trust my family, especially my uncle, so I dismissed the unease creeping up inside me. Even though something felt off, I kept quiet. I didn't want to accuse him without proof or create conflict. I reminded myself that family should be trustworthy, that mistakes happen, and that I might be overthinking. Still, a tiny knot of doubt had formed in my stomach, a warning I chose to ignore. Looking back now, those scratches and dents were the first cracks in the trust one had placed in Darren. It was subtle, almost invisible at the time, but it marked the beginning of a betrayal that would slowly grow, changing how I saw my family and forcing me to take steps I never imagined I would need to take. One afternoon, I received a call from a used car dealership asking about my SUV. I froze, confused, and my heart sank. I quickly realized something was wrong. After a few frantic calls and digging through paperwork, I discovered the truth. Darren had secretly sold the SUV. He had used it to cover his own debts, without asking or telling anyone. I couldn't breathe at first. The car wasn't just a vehicle, it was a gift from Grandpa Eben, a symbol of trust and love. The fact that he had sold it without even considering how it would affect me left me stunned. Every memory I had of that SUV, every road trip I imagined, every moment of security it gave me, felt like it had been stolen. The timing made it worse. Just days earlier, Grandpa had asked me about the SUV, full of pride and affection. He had trusted me to care for it, and now I had to face the humiliation of telling him it was gone. I felt like I had failed, even though it wasn't my fault. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. It wasn't just about the money or the car, it was about trust. I had believed in my family, believed in their intentions, and believed in Darren's pretended support. Now, all of that lay in ruins. Anger mixed with sadness, and tears blurred my vision as I realized how much had been manipulated behind my back. My sense of security, my belief in family loyalty, had shattered in an instant. For the first time, I understood that some people can hurt you the most when you least expect it, and that realization would change everything I thought I knew about those closest to me. After discovering what Darren had done, my emotions were a storm I couldn't calm. Anger flared in my chest, sadness weighed heavily on my shoulders, and disbelief made it hard to focus on anything else. I kept replaying the moment I learned the truth, unable to shake the feeling of being deeply wronged. Every thought of him smiling while selling something so meaningful to me made my stomach twist. For a while, I wanted to storm into his room and demand answers, to let all my frustration and hurt spill out. But as the initial rage passed, I realized acting on impulse could make things worse. I needed to think carefully, to handle the situation in a way that protected myself and, more importantly, revealed the truth without giving him any chance to twist it. That night, I sat quietly at my desk and opened a small, plain notebook I had tucked away. I decided it would become my secret record. Every detail mattered, the dates when Darren asked for the SUV, every excuse he gave, each moment that hinted at his manipulation. I wrote down every conversation I overheard, every small lie or half-truth, and even the money trail I started to uncover. It was strangely comforting to document everything. Writing gave me clarity and control over a situation that had made me feel powerless. The notebook became my anchor, a private strategy guide that would help me navigate the betrayal with precision. I could channel my emotions into something tangible, something that could turn this pain into a plan rather than letting it consume me. In that quiet space, I made a promise to myself: I wouldn't let this betrayal define me, and I would find a way to confront it with careful thought and undeniable proof. Once I had my notes organized, I realized I couldn't let Darren continue to manipulate everything unchecked. I started taking small steps to reclaim control, careful not to draw attention. First, I reached out to a lawyer Grandpa and Grandma trusted, sharing what I had documented about Darren's mismanagement of family finances. I didn't accuse him outright yet, I simply provided facts, letting the professional connect the dots. At the same time, I began securing my own financial safety. I moved savings into accounts only I could access and reviewed legal documents related to the family's assets. I wanted to make sure that even if Darren tried to interfere, I would have protection. It was tedious work, but it gave me a sense of stability I desperately needed after the shock of betrayal. Every step was deliberate. I observed him closely during family gatherings, noting his behavior, listening to how he spoke about responsibilities, and quietly recording anything that confirmed my suspicions. It felt strange to plan quietly against a family member, but the hurt he caused made it necessary. What made it sting the most wasn't just the loss of the SUV or his lies, it was that it came from my own blood. The trust one had in family had been weaponized against me, and that knowledge fueled my determination. I couldn't allow myself to be a passive victim. Even as I acted behind the scenes, I felt a mix of sorrow and resolve. The process was exhausting emotionally, but each careful step reminded me that I was reclaiming power over a situation I had once thought hopeless. Slowly, I was turning the betrayal into an opportunity to protect myself and expose the truth. I realized I couldn't confront Darren blindly, I needed to know where everyone else stood. Over the next few weeks, I watched family interactions carefully, paying attention to subtle cues. At dinners and gatherings, I noticed who laughed at his jokes, who excused his behavior, and who stayed silent when he made thinly veiled criticisms. Some relatives, like my cousins, seemed to side with him without realizing the impact of their words. They weren't malicious, they were unaware or intimidated by his presence. My parents occasionally nodded along, not wanting conflict, but it made me see how easy it could be for Darren to manipulate those around him. It was a delicate situation, and I had to tread carefully. I didn't want to alienate the innocent or create unnecessary drama. My goal wasn't revenge at the expense of others, it was to hold Darren accountable. I began mapping out a plan in my notebook, noting each person's tendencies, their reactions, and the best way to reveal the truth without dragging anyone else into unnecessary turmoil. Watching them interact with him, I realized how isolation had allowed his manipulations to go unnoticed. Some family members assumed I was overreacting, while others didn't see the full picture. That insight became crucial. I knew I needed irrefutable evidence to prevent him from twisting the story or shifting blame. By quietly observing and recording, I gathered both proof and strategy. I was no longer just reacting, I was thinking ahead, considering the impact on everyone while ensuring that Darren's betrayal would be fully exposed. Each careful step brought me closer to reclaiming fairness and protecting the family from further deceit. After weeks of careful observation, I knew it was time to prepare for the confrontation. I spent long nights gathering every piece of evidence I could find. Bank statements showing suspicious transactions, receipts proving the SUV had been sold, and notes from conversations where Darren had lied were all compiled in an organized folder. I even discreetly spoke to a few witnesses who had noticed his unusual behavior, making sure their statements were clear and factual. Once I had everything ready, I realized that timing and presence were critical. I couldn't confront him when only a few people were around, I needed the entire family, especially Grandpa Eben, to see the truth firsthand. After some planning, I suggested a family dinner. Everyone agreed, unaware that the real purpose was about to unfold. As the day arrived, I felt a mix of anxiety and determination. Setting the table, arranging the seating, and making sure Grandpa was comfortable, all of it mattered. I kept my folder close, tucked under the table, a quiet reassurance that I was prepared. The room buzzed with casual chatter at first, but beneath it, I could feel the tension building inside me. I watched Darren from across the room, noticing how confident he appeared, oblivious to what was coming. My heart pounded, but I reminded myself to stay calm, to present the facts without anger, and to let the evidence speak for itself. Every glance at my grandparents reminded me why I had to do this. Grandpa Eben had always believed in fairness, honesty, and family integrity. This confrontation wouldn't just be about the SUV, it would be about revealing Darren's deceit clearly, leaving no room for doubt. The stage was set, and the moment to finally expose the betrayal was within reach. Once everyone was seated, I took a deep breath and opened the folder I had prepared. I spoke slowly, making sure my voice stayed steady. "There's something important I need to share with all of you," I began. One by one, I laid out the evidence, bank records, receipts, and notes that clearly showed Darren had sold the SUV without permission and mismanaged other family matters. The room grew quiet. I could see Grandpa Eben's face change, his eyes widening as he processed each detail. There was a mixture of shock and pain in his expression, but beneath it, I sensed pride. He recognized that I had handled the situation with thoughtfulness and courage, and that gave me strength. Darren immediately started to speak, trying to twist the story, deny facts, and place blame elsewhere. But I stayed calm, letting the documents and statements do the work. Every lie he attempted was contradicted by clear, undeniable evidence. I didn't raise my voice or argue, facts alone revealed the truth. I noticed other family members exchanging looks, realizing for the first time the extent of his deceit. Darren's confident facade began to crack. He faltered, searching for excuses, but every point I presented held strong. When I finished, silence lingered for a few moments. Grandpa Eben placed a hand on my shoulder, a gesture of both sorrow for the betrayal and pride for the way I had handled it. The weight of the moment hit me, but I also felt a strange relief. The truth was out, Darren could no longer hide behind lies, and the family could begin to heal from the manipulation that had quietly taken root. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of control, knowing I had confronted the betrayal directly and allowed honesty to guide the outcome. The moment the evidence was laid out, the atmosphere shifted. Whispers filled the room as relatives processed what they had just heard. Some looked at Darren with disbelief, others with anger. Sides formed quietly, like a storm gathering strength. Tension hung in the air, thick and suffocating, as family members struggled to come to terms with the truth. I felt a strange mixture of relief and exhaustion. The secrecy and doubt that had weighed on me for weeks were finally lifted. I could breathe a little easier knowing that the deception no longer had power over me. Seeing the truth revealed gave me a sense of catharsis I hadn't expected, a cleansing of all the frustration, sadness, and fear that had built up inside me. Grandpa Eben stood slowly and placed a hand on my shoulder, his eyes full of emotion. In front of everyone, he acknowledged the courage it took for me to gather proof and speak calmly. He expressed his disappointment in Darren's actions, but he also reinforced his trust in me, making it clear to everyone that I had acted with integrity and fairness. That moment strengthened the bond between us, a reminder that honesty and patience could overcome betrayal. Darren tried to defend himself, but most relatives avoided his gaze, their expressions heavy with judgment. The shame of being exposed was evident on his face. Meanwhile, I felt a quiet triumph, not from hurting him, but from restoring truth and protecting the family from further manipulation. By the end of the evening, the room had shifted. While the tension didn't vanish completely, there was clarity. Lies had been confronted, alliances had been tested, and I had finally reclaimed my place as someone who could be trusted, even when facing the harshest family deception. After the confrontation, I knew I needed to make things right, not just emotionally but practically. I sat down with the lawyer my grandparents trusted and explained exactly what I wanted. It wasn't revenge for revenge's sake, it was about restoring fairness. We worked out an arrangement requiring Darren to return the money from the SUV sale or compensate for its value and damages. He had no choice but to comply. At the same time, I focused on protecting my grandparents. I reviewed their accounts, updated permissions, and made sure Darren no longer had access to funds he could misuse. I also suggested safeguards for future financial decisions, ensuring that nothing could be handled without their explicit approval. It wasn't about controlling them, it was about shielding them from further deception. The process wasn't simple. Darren resisted at first, grumbling and trying to find loopholes, but the evidence was clear and the law on our side. Step by step, justice was restored. Watching him reluctantly follow through with the agreement brought a quiet sense of satisfaction, not from seeing him punished, but from knowing that integrity and planning had won. Emotionally, the weight lifted from my shoulders. Weeks of stress, fear, and uncertainty were replaced with calm and clarity. I realized that my patience and careful strategy had made a tangible difference. The betrayal that had once left me feeling powerless had transformed into a moment of empowerment. By the end, my grandparents were safe, the SUV loss was compensated, and Darren could no longer interfere. I had reclaimed control, not through anger, but through careful planning and persistence. The balance had been restored, and with it came a deep sense of justice that reminded me why standing firm and thinking ahead always matters. Sitting quietly after everything had settled, I took a moment to think about everything that had happened. The pain of being deceived by someone I trusted ran deep, and the disappointment lingered longer than I expected. But as I reflected, I realized how much I had grown through the experience. The betrayal forced me to face uncomfortable truths, to recognize manipulation, and to find strength I didn't know I had. I thought about Grandpa Eben and Grandma May, and how much their love had guided me even when family loyalty faltered. Protecting them became a priority, but I also understood that protecting myself was equally important. The ordeal had shown me that standing firm against toxic behavior, even from people you care about, is sometimes necessary to preserve your well-being and the well-being of those you love. I also considered the patience and strategy it took to navigate the situation. Acting impulsively could have made everything worse, but careful planning allowed me to turn the betrayal into something that restored balance rather than caused more harm. It was a lesson in resilience and foresight, learning to measure each step while maintaining your principles. Looking back, the SUV and the lies were more than material losses, they were tests of judgment, courage, and integrity. I realized that life sometimes forces difficult lessons, and how we respond can define who we become. I smiled softly, feeling a sense of closure. The hurt still lingered, but it was tempered by strength and wisdom. I had faced deception, acted decisively, and protected those who mattered most. And in that moment, I understood the truth I would carry forward. Sometimes the people you trust most can hurt you, but courage and careful planning turn betrayal into triumph. Do you think I handled Darren the right way, or should I have forgiven him sooner? I'm really curious to hear your thoughts in the comments.